I see a lot of familiar faces here, but I feel like I gotta, explain a little bit about our university just to make sure that everybody knows who we are. So we're from William Paris University. We are one of the state universities in New Jersey. And do you see the map here? So this is Hudson River. This is George Washington Bridge. So it's about from New York City. And it takes about 45 minutes from this bridge to our campus if there's no traffic. And I think we can skip this slide because we are already introduced. So Joelle, do you want to take this slide?
Sure. The only thing that I wanted to highlight about who we are is that we represent different roles at the College of Ed. So oftentimes when we're thinking about assessment, these are assessment coordinators, but we collaboratively work together from an administrative role in the dean's office, a chair, and faculty members, so that we can kind of talk about the process, because as you're trying to create new assessments, especially at the advanced level, there's varying levels of where everyone fits. So I just wanted to highlight that we're in a range of roles. Today, we're going to look at how the College of Ed's advanced program turned new accreditation requirements into an opportunity, how we designed standard-based programs, we refined our competencies to make high-impact practices, we developed curriculum, which we started to call CAEP Ready, as we used their framework to look at how to design and ensure that we were meeting the sufficient level of the EPP framework for, the CAEP framework for EPP created assessments, sorry. And then we're gonna go through that whole process. So I like to talk about things at different levels. So just big picture, like 20,000 feet above the ground, what we're gonna talk about is how we dissected the CAEP framework. We had to build a better understanding of qualitative rubrics and retool ourselves. We had to design developmental progressions. We created common assessments. We piloted, and then we created and implemented a system of review based on our data, and now we're practicing the closing the loop. One of the things that's really important to remember in this whole change is that in New Jersey, there were a lot of changes that started to happen. We started to see increased state regulation. There was a new program approval process. There were new CAEP accreditation accreditation standards that really shifted from at William Patterson, we used to be NCATE, and we used our results from CAEP assessment instruments as well as our SPA reports. So oftentimes we felt like we were being pushed and pulled in many different ways, and that's what our visual is kind of talking about, was how do we define ourselves when there's so many competing driving forces that need all of our attention. So one of the first things that we did in trying to turn regulation into an opportunity was really to ground our work in standards, best practices, and the needs of our partners. So in the past, oftentimes when we looked at standards, there wasn't a direct alignment. There were always things that we were doing, and then we saw correlations. This time, we really looked at the standards and developed a great way of unpacking it so that our faculty understand the different roles. So some of the resources that we used were the national and state standards. I'm sure you're all very familiar with them. We had a keen eye on the high leverage practices from TeachingWorks. We looked at improvement science from the Carnegie Foundation for Advancement of Teaching. We looked at the continuum of teacher development from Sharon Feynman-Nemser. We looked at better understanding the preparation of educators to meet the needs of diverse, underserved students. We focused on pedagogical content knowledge and the work of the Garden State Alliance for Strengthening Education. And here we started to kind of think about how some of these things were magnetic, where they came together. So instead of always seeing ourselves as being pulled apart, we started to come together. And this was a really big process for the advanced program. So one of our biggest roles was to create a common ground from dissent to consent. And we talk about it because we really began in 15 when the advanced standards were issued by CAEP. So oftentimes, many of our faculty of our advanced programs, they're content experts in a range of disciplines. So they often saw themselves as in their specific camp. And what we had to do was talk about strengthening their expertise, but to talk about how there was a commonality. So although Heejung is an expert in educational technology and Jerry's an expert in literacy, the programs had to have specific skill sets that were unifying them. And you really see that with CAEP standard A.1.1, right?
Yes.
And so we really wanted to highlight this idea. And we went back to looking at Dr. Seuss's The Sneetches, because there's a wonderful story about how some were Starbelly and some were not, but at the end, it didn't matter where you were at. So we're going to kind of break down what happened, how we were able to move from dissent to consent. So as I had mentioned before, we saw ourselves in our different discipline camps. So even though our skill sets, when we think of a recipe, oftentimes we're using the same ingredients, but how we moved into them, the different advanced programs may have been making a cake or a pie or bread or spaghetti, but we in the College of Ed started to land on, all of us are building this cake together. So that was where we really had to ground ourselves in the standards. And we started to think about how we wanted to prepare our students both in two tracks. They were professionals who were going to be ready day one, and they needed to be content experts. So when we think about the standards, the professional standards, which are pretty generic, are CAEP, InTask, the New Jersey Professional Standards of Teachers, and the District Codes of Conduct. But then you had to understand the specific content, which is your SPA standards. We looked at the New Jersey Student Learning Standards and the district curriculum. So that here we're starting to see that these differences, but there's also this commonality. So when we rooted ourselves in the standards, we started to see a broader collaborative picture. So as I talk about the CAEP, the foundational layer was most important, is that we all needed to understand where we were coming from. So our foundation is grounded in research and best practices, as we had mentioned the standards. We had to redefine ourselves, and we revised our mission and vision. And you'll see that at the upper levels, the cake is split in two. So on the left side, it's the work that we did with initial programs, and on the right side, it's the work that we did with advanced programs. And so we had to reframe our learning, our student learning outcomes. And in the next layer, you'll see that we defined our student learning outcomes for the programs to have a commonality. In the College of Ed at William-Patterson, we use competencies rather than SLOs, but they're synonymous. Then from building our SLOs, the different courses developed their objectives, and then at the top, we needed to assess whether we were measuring our competencies through the assessments that we were creating. And the little flaming candle is the collaborative work that we do. So again, when we started to think about the refinement of our competencies, we looked at these three distinct sets of standards at the national, state, and local levels. So the Venn diagram is a great way to explain how we were able to show the intersection of all of them that led to our development of our initial and advanced competencies. And you'll see that we added like an orange plus because we have our competencies for initial and advanced programs, but many of our programs are also SPA accredited. So when we think of holistically, all of our programs know and are able to do our 18 competencies for initial programs, and 9 for advanced. And if there's a plus, then you'll see that there's additional SPA standards or any standard that a program developed that they wanted to measure. So now that you have big picture, now we got to get into the weeds of what we were able to do. So on the left side, we started to look at the administrative role and then the faculty role. So the first thing that we did as administrators was we conducted a needs assessment. This is where we got feedback from CAEP assessments. This was when CAEP first started out, you were able to submit assessments for review. And we were lucky because we were one of the first institutions that was able to do that before they discontinued that service. And because the college was NCAEP, we were routinely used to preparing SPA reports. But when we did the 2016 submission, we realized that we were getting a lot of feedback that our rubrics were not meeting the sufficient level of the CAEP framework. So that really forced us to really take a hard look of ourselves. So we applied to CAEP for a good cause extension because we really needed to spend some time developing these new developing tools and an understanding of the changes that were happening with accreditation. So we worked in 2 ways. We assembled a task force of faculty, but we also worked with an outside agency that was leading in the development of teacher evaluations. So we worked with McREL International, and we conducted a college-wide professional development so that we could unpack all of these standards. Additionally, throughout the work that we did, we always provided supports for faculty. Again, when we think about these competing tensions, you have people who are early adopters and late adopters. So different people were coming in different roles. I'm going to turn it over to Heejung to talk about what it was like as a faculty member.
All right. Thank you so much, Joelle. So during summer 2017, we faculty start to embark in this whole process. So we are gonna explain, Jerry and I'm gonna explain what we did each semester. But here, if you look at briefly table of contents, summer 2017, we created 8 collaborative working groups, and we develop our common assessments. We call these CIAs and common rubrics. Also, we employ peer review process, like a journal review process, and we revise them. And at the same time, after that, we receive the feedback from McREL International. And the following semester for 2017, we brought all of our work to the department, and we had to discuss, and then to get faculty on board, and we pilot them. And after that, we created our council, Graduate Program Advisory Council and Education Leadership Advisory Council. And we conducted validity studies. And during spring 2018, after that, we created revision task working groups, and we revised our work after piloting our assessment and rubric, and we revised our bylaw. And we created our new committee to make sure that all program directors are involved in this process. And during 2018, we implemented our revised CIAs and revised rubrics. And during spring 2019, we have every year we are actually having annual retreat, and we focused on assessment at the time, and we conducted reliability studies. And last 2 years, we continuously collect the data. And then during 2020, our committee reviewed our data and we analyzed, and then we also suggested some kind of improvement. And we had a CAEP visit, virtual site visit. So right now we keep working on this, and then we are doing inter-rater reliability study. So let me actually, this is the first semester we are embarked. We volunteer, Jerry, I volunteer to join advanced working group, right? So we read the article. Joelle provided excellent article. Joelle provided the framework. So with that framework, during summer in the Dean's conference room, it's almost like a boot camp. We read the article and discussed how we are going to actually make it work. So first thing we did was, as Joelle explained, we had to shift our mindset from NK to CAEP, right? So we used to have some sort of our kind of framework. We used to have our competency from NK time period. We had to revise them. So we look at our CAEP standard and we design our competency. So we came up with 9 competency and we call this SLO. And we also created indicators under each competency. And then after that, we design common rubrics. So each competency has a rubric and also description so that we can assess that competency. And then we designed assessments. And then we swap each other. So another group will look at our work and then we give them feedback and vice versa. And we revise our work. And then after that, we send it to McRail International, also receive feedback and we revise it. So we revise it 2 times during the summer. It's hard to see, but if you look at the right side, this is our first work. We came up with 9 competency. So when we look at this advanced standard, what we are thinking first time in our mind is that how we can operationalize this CAEP standard, right? So, and then we try to look at this. Let's focus on similarity. We have so many advanced programs in our college. So right now, let's not focus on differences. Let's focus on our similarity. Try to come up with the common competence that we can use, employ through the various our program. So we use, as you look at here, we also received from Joelle the table, the Bloom taxonomy, the table. So we almost like look at this throughout what's the right verb to utilize this. So
I think what's also important before Heejung moves along was one of the obstacles that we found was when we started to review the data, we aligned everything to CAEP standard A.1.1. And our competencies, had a direct alignment to, if you recall the CAEP standards, they're like a bullet list. So it really became unclear when we looked at our data which specific bullet CAEP we were referring to. So you'll see on the left side that we actually had to do a coding so that when we were talking about the first bullet, it was A.1.1a, little a, A.1.1 little b, A.1.1c, A.1.1d, A.1.1e, and A.1.1f. So this was something that we learned as we went through and then had to revise because we needed to make sure that we could understand how students were able to demonstrate their level of mastery for each of the bullets. So that was a big, that was a big aha moment, when we were planning not to take it into consideration. So learn from us to however you want to learn, however you want to differentiate. You're more than welcome to use our alphabet. So Heejung, I'm going to bring it back to you.
All right, so let me just briefly explain this 9 competency. We just want to make sure our candidate have content knowledge for their discipline, and also how to use technology for instructional practices. If you look at 4, to use how to use technology for collect, analyze data, we wanted to make sure we want to differentiate, using technology for instruction, using technology for data analysis and data collections, and how to gather, analyze data for their own discipline. And they have to know how to use and apply research to improve their own learning environment, and also professional ethics, responsibilities, and they have to demonstrate professional dispositions, and they have to demonstrate commitment to diversity, and they have to have, because of advanced program, they have to lead and participate in the professional community to support their own standard and their own learning environment. And then that's the first task we did. We came up with our 9 competency. And then after that, we have to come up with our common rubric. So Jerry?
Right, exactly. Thank you, Heejung. So now the next big task which everyone absolutely loves doing, is creating the rubrics of all of these competencies. So we decided to look at it through a continuum of the profession, also leaning on Sharon Nems's work. So we're looking at the whole picture. We're looking at pre-service and in-service. So what did we define at each level for novice, developing, proficient, and advanced for the pre-service teacher? And then how is it going to look for the advanced program? So of course, the first thing we noticed is that obviously they're at different levels. So we wouldn't expect that the advanced teacher would begin at novice. Okay, so we called it emerging. Emerging because they already have some skills and knowledge, but now they're moving up to another level. And what important thing to point out at this level is that they are strengthening their knowledge, which is important, but their professional dispositions, and they're moving to understanding what it means to be a professional, and therefore what are the responsibilities for leadership. So all of that gets combined into proficient, where you see it deepens, extends knowledge and skills, and professionalism. Again, this is where they have the opportunity to hone and polish their repertoire. Is their toolkit, in curriculum and in teaching and assessment. So they're building on it, improving it at all times. And then, of course, to be exemplary, you go to the highest levels using Bloom's descriptive words, but synthesis and evaluating. So they've reached that top level. But it's not the end, because in order to be sustain professional learning, and continuous growth, you need to continue to be a learner and continue to hone those skills as we describe here in this slide.
The other thing that's really important to notice was that in that slide is that as we were really reviewing a lot of our data, that we realized that many of the students in our advanced programs were our undergraduates. So when we were thinking about how do we make sure that their learning became seamless, that we were using the data from our alumni surveys, that many of them were returning back to us. So it was really important that we could build on the work that they learned as a pre-service teacher during their induction year, that we could support them to then moving between the different levels depending on what the different skill sets are.
Right. I mean, we're very careful to be very descriptive, right, in what we expected, so you could see the rigor at each level. So we didn't number the 1, 2, 3, 4. They had clearly specific descriptors for both the undergraduate, right, and the graduate. So it tells us what the expectations actually are. So we have a new teacher cert program. So I'm thinking about that program and how one of those candidates would fit into these advanced program, into these levels. And I could see that person coming in with some experience, 1, 3, 20 years actually of teaching, and then moving through each level, developing and honing their skills and their repertoire to become that true leader, which is the final goal for us. And again, we're preparing coaches and leaders, grade level leaders of a variety of types. So all of them, we have the expectation they would move through exemplary here. So exemplary is actually all of the above, if you look at emerging, which is so tiny because I can't read it at the moment, developing and proficient. And the exemplary level is all of the above, plus that working on that professionalism, that's the key piece there. And they continue to refine that repertoire. And to demonstrate throughout the assessments that they can really do this higher order thinking in relationship to leadership.
So in the chat, if you click here, common design features of rubrics, you will see the document that we are provided with. So Joelle provided us this nice rubric features. So we use that template to create our common rubrics. Right, and then now let me discuss about how we actually design and what we design for common assessments. So we design 3 common assessment: inquiry projects, leadership project, advanced professional disposition assessments, and technology project. But I don't want to call this project because we only created rubric law. Let me explain this first. So inquiry project, and as we discussed before, we had 9 competencies. So we embedded 4 competency, but we also wanted to add written communications. And within that inquiry project, in addition to these 5 rubric elements, each program also could add their own elements. So 5 common elements, and then literacy program, they have their own specialized, their own rubric law. And then for my own STEM program, which I can also add something else. For other programs, so they have a freedom. At the same time, we all had some common rubric that we had to use. Leadership project, if you see now, we embedded 4 competency. Some competency are kind of, double dip. If you see that we assess this twice to make sure that they have really content knowledge. AC1 is content and knowledge for their discipline. And we also created our assessment, which is AC2, Advanced Competency 2. For technology, each program already had their own project. So we didn't want to kind of create a common project. Rather, we only created rubric law, right? And then embed this rubric into your project. So we gave them freedom so that we can keep using what we did. At the same time, we use this rubric. We also have a thesis, but this is only from MED program only. But we again measure AC1, 3, and 4, and 5. Because the reason why we create inquiry project, since this is project only for MED students, we had to choose a class in which all of our endorsement students, certificate students, at the same time, MED students are together. So they have an opportunity to do this inquiry project. So for MED students, they have 2 times of opportunity. They do this inquiry project, like a small study, and after they conduct a small study, they come to master thesis classes, and then they are doing the bigger study.
So I just want to let you know, so as Heejung had mentioned, she put the link into our PowerPoint, and wherever you're seeing the green, those are hyperlinks, so you can actually see the assessment. So in the slide before, there's the guidance document for designing rubrics, this way that we're demonstrating to our faculty and to CAEP what our different levels are, and then the actual projects that we're implementing are also based on the way that you're making your assessment narratives for the CAEP report. And so what was important that Heejung had talked about was the rubrics, was that we didn't want to over-assess students, that we were hoping that these common assessments were able to draw from the information from the SPA reports, so that you could really see that we were really thinking about the landscape oftentimes at 20,000 feet and then low with each of the different programs. But you have access to all of that through the hyperlink that's in the chat, and anything that's green actually has the materials.
So, do you see guidance document, the words? So guidance document includes assessment and also rubric, and then something else is there. So we give guidance document to our students, so they can see everything. They can see the assessment, they can see rubric, and also instruction directions. So we actually posted our guidance document on our Blackboard. So now I'm gonna turn this to Jerry.
Thank you, Heejung. And you can see, as Heejung explained, that we had a very busy summer and produced a great deal of materials that we now had to share with the department. So I have to switch hats and become the chair. And in the fall, introduce much of this work that we did. My department, Educational Leadership and Professional Studies, is composed of all advanced and graduate programs. So you could see, right, how much their tie-in is there and how important this was. It's to introduce these new materials in a way that we can onboard people and get them excited, hopefully, about the new CI, the common unit assessments, and the rubrics. Some of the things we had to point out was particularly the common unit assessments. Many of them were doing that already, but just in different programs, so they weren't necessarily talking to one another, but many of them had like a school evaluation or a PD already embedded, some sort of inquiry project. It's just that no one talked to anyone else. They didn't realize they're all doing the same thing. And of course, we didn't have a common rubric. So one major piece of this was getting the individuals involved, which would be the program directors, and the program directors hopefully get their faculty involved and on board with this change. And I think someone mentioned it earlier, they were used to, they got NJACTE. So now it was like, oh no, here you go, you're gonna change it, and we had to make them understand that these changes were really an improvement for their program. They were gonna get much better, much richer data that they could truly analyze and would inform their program and their program decisions. That didn't happen right away. In fact, that was one of the selling points when we were talking about it. I had been the chair for like over 10 years at this time, so I knew most of the personalities. So kind of tried to reach out to those who I thought would be easier to, let's say, convince to give this, a whirl and have a positive attitude so it would spread through the department. But you just have to know how far you could push and how much you could ask at one particular time. One of the directors of the EDLP program was very well respected in the department and had a very successful program, still is a successful program. And I was shocked because he gave the most pushback to these ideas, to the new ideas. And that reflected poorly in the department because everyone more or less looked up to him and respected him as well. So it took me a little while to get him on our side. It was one of those moments of picking the battle. He wanted to keep his admission standards. He didn't want to use the group interview that we were going to use. So small steps, say, okay, you can keep that. Just have to be sure that you can, demonstrate validity to something he brought to his advisory council, and over time realized that it really truly wasn't practical. And in the end, but it was a couple years later, EDLP did switch to the common assessment, what we call the ADAP. So it's just little steps, one at a time. And eventually, I have to say, almost everyone was on board. So it kind of had a happy ending. Thank you.
Joelle?
So one of the things that we had to really make sure that we were doing was meeting the CAEP sufficient level. So all of you are sure very all of you are familiar with this guidance document from CAEP. But when we had to begin to think about how we were going to use it for the review of our assessments, we realized that there really isn't a one-to-one ratio, right? So if you look at what was below sufficient, there's 4 indicators, but at the sufficient level, there were 5, and then exemplary, there were 3. So we really had to spend time unpacking the guidance document to make it actionable. So what we did is that we converted the framework into survey questions so that when they reviewed the assessment, the faculty had actionable work to use. So that took a lot of time to kind of build out, because we thought we could just put the questions into a survey, but that did not work. So there was a lot of unpacking of these items to make sure that we were meeting the CAEP standards as well as providing resources to the faculty.
All right, so in and after, that summer, it was hard summer. Now And then we pilot our work. And then we realized that, look, we got to really revise this. And also we piloted, so we knew that they're going to push back. And then, they suggest a lot of recommendations. So now let's set up our revision task force working group. But we wanted to make sure that, for our department, let's kind of take 2 faculty members who are not involved in the initial design process so that they can look at our work from more like a fresher eyes. So they give us a feedback, and then we implemented their feedback into our work. Generally speaking, we already knew this. We all know one size does not fit all, right? But we had to make one size fit all, which was hard. At the same time, we had to make sure that we really adhere to our CAEP requirements. And we also had a lot of description indicator under each competency. So our rubric must capture those indicators. But at the same time, we wanted to give freedom for each program. So we modified assessment guidance documents so that it really would address all our program different needs. At the same time, capture commonalities. And course assessment alignment. We first thought this assessment would work certain courses, but we realized, no, that don't work. So we had to kind of change and swap. Let's put this assessment in these courses. And the rubric, as I mentioned also, we have to modify rubric description to meet all of our program needs. At the same time, CAEP requirements. At the same time, really capture our indicators. And also we realized that our technology rubric law that we designed does not work for all departments because our advanced program, sometimes we have teacher audience and education leadership. They don't really use technology. Rather, they have to guide the teacher to use them. They have to instill culture in their school to use technology. So we have to modify languages. So we kind of had 2 versions. Let's create 2 versions for teachers and also for leadership, program. But it was a very challenge. As we designed it first. We redesigned our work first. And then we had to bring this in our department and faculty to use them. So we can imagine that how faculty responded. They felt very uncomfortable. They complained a lot. How can we use like a one type of description? How can we use one rubric? So it took 4 or 5 years to make things work. And we also were advised to create our council, advisor council to meet CAEP standard A.1.1. So we created 2 council, graduate program advisor council. So this council, we means the program that deal with the teacher, special education program and curriculum learning program and literacy program. And education leadership, they had their own advisory council. So the members include department chairs, program directors, and current students and alumni. So we met every semester. So during spring 2018, we used this group of people, right? They're main stakeholder to conduct our validity study so that they can be part of our evaluation process. So they can help us to improve our work. At the same time, they give us sometimes to share their own like a model and what they think that are important in their own school district. So we conduct content validity study. We use a rush method, and which Joelle brought in to us. And following semester, we conduct again validity study because we have 3 common assessment. We couldn't do that everything in one meeting. And at that time, we actually use our assessment. But we use a different method. Joelle, was there any reason why we brought different method?
Just based on our own professional learning. So as we were, delving into validity studies, the UNC model from Charlotte just was easier to use and had a better connection. Loshi is the Loshi model, which is great and easy to do, is a lot older. So we were just, updating that kind of work.
I just want to add the Educational Leadership Advisory Council was kind of morphed from a large grant that they had. It was a steering committee. And what's important about that group is that there were several teachers, supervisors, vice principals, superintendents. So it was a broader voice of people, and they were very valuable on that committee, and they still are, and they still attend. So they're a valuable voice.
Right. And we also had 2 annual retreats. So through those retreat meetings, we conduct reliability study. So 2018, I realized that I had a measurement assessment background for my doctoral program. So I realized that, look, we need to start with something very basic. We don't have foundation knowledge. So let's just give us some lecture pertaining to reliability. So people don't understand what it means by reliability. And then I share different method of estimating reliability. And then we share this CAEP evaluation framework. And we try to really meet this here above sufficient level. And then among different methodology, we decide to choose a percent agreement to establish our inter-rater reliability. But we had to show this table many times. It didn't work at once. We showed this table about like 10 times to our colleagues, to be honest with you, to make sure that they really understand this. And then we know that our faculty are busy. They have to do a lot of other work. So we we show this again. So it takes a lot of persistence and the patience.
Hi, I'm sorry. I just wanted to alert you. We have about 1 or 2 minutes left.
Joelle, do you want to quickly go over this?
Sure, yes. So basically, we also realized that there were a lot of demands, again, right? We have competing things that were happening, and we realized that we didn't have a mechanism to really do all of the work that we needed to do with our structure. So we had to revise our bylaws to incorporate program review. And that was a big shift because we had to change our protocols. And the biggest change that we did is that we started the continuous improvement committee, which now meets each semester and has different tasks. And the most important thing is the membership. The membership is now all of the program directors so that they have their pulse on the work that's happening. So we revised our bylaws, and then we implemented the committee. We worked on programmatic review using Google, and that was our first programmatic review for the CAEP self-study. And all of this from spring 20 to now, we're doing all virtually. So we had to build a format and a platform so that this could happen. And this semester, we're doing reliability of assessments for the advanced programs. And we're lucky because our data management platform, Chalk and Wire, actually has a feature to do the inter-rater reliability at one time. The other thing that's really important is that supporting faculty and candidates. Like as Jerry and Heejung had mentioned, there's different, people are coming in at different times, so you always wanted to support them. We first started with the creation of Blackboard communities where all materials are always posted. And then because of the pandemic, we've moved to SharePoint so that we can have different conversations, and it's so easy to use. And we have different portals for whether you're a student or faculty to help make sure that they always are on board.
All right, so, it was not that easy to summarize what we have done for the past 5-6 years. And if we are expecting CAEP site visit, what I want you to think about is, what are your driving forces to change? In each school, I'm sure have different culture, different atmosphere, and were any of these processes we explained, we share was helpful for you? And if so, which one, you can pick and choose. And how might you be able to really apply this process at your university and college? And what challenges might you face? So these are our prompt discussion questions. And then all our share, our links, I'll just put it here. What I just entered here is our slide, right? So you will also see all links there, embedded links, and please feel free to use them and modify them as needed.